Chairman Self, Ranking Member Keating, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today about Chinese hybrid warfare in Europe. I'm pleased to offer policy insights from the Nonpartisan Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where I serve as a senior fellow. In my view, China's hybrid warfare strategy is best understood as a campaign to shape European decisions before a crisis, so that when a crisis comes, Beijing faces a more divided, distracted, and dependent continent. To achieve that objective, China is investing in hybrid tools to gain access and leverage, using commercial deals, cultural outreach, cyber operations, disinformation, and quiet economic coercion today to create the strategic advantages it needs tomorrow. In that sense, Beijing does not see Europe as a sideshow. It sees Europe as a central arena in its long-term competition with the United States, a key source of technology, capital, and regulatory weight. If Beijing can blunt or break transatlantic resolve, it can improve its chances of prevailing in future fights over Taiwan, global standards, or sanctions, because any US-led response will be slower, narrower, and easier for China to circumvent. On the ground, China's hybrid campaign in Europe falls into three lines of effort: penetration, prepositioning, and pressure. Penetration targets Europe's networks, politics, and information space through state-backed hacking, united front and party-to-party ties, and norm-shaping tools such as Confucius Institutes and loosely regulated research partnerships. Prepositioning embeds Chinese firms in ports, logistics hubs, telecom networks, data centers, and renewable energy supply chains, creating strategic dependence by design. And then comes pressure. Informal trade blockages, counter-sanctions, and threats to market access when European states cross Beijing's political red lines. All of this is happening while China acts as a lifeline for Russia's war machine and its broader hybrid assault on Ukraine and NATO. Chinese companies now provide a large share of the machine tools, microelectronics, and other dual-use goods Russia needs to sustain high-intensity combat. Taken together, Russia and China are running a complementary hybrid playbook. Moscow relies on overt aggression and crude disinformation. Beijing prefers slow, patient moves, softer influence, and economic leverage wrapped in the language of partnership and peace. At the same time Russian attacks drain European unity and stockpiles, Chinese dependencies make it harder for some governments to absorb the costs of a long struggle. The goal is the same: to corrode confidence, fracture alliances, and normalize a narrative of Western decline. Some European governments have restricted high-risk vendors, tightened investment screening, and have begun to reassess Confucius Institutes. But the broader response is still uneven, especially in ports, telecom networks, supply chains, and research ecosystems. And that unevenness is exactly what Beijing seeks to exploit. So what should we do? In my view, three priorities stand out. First, treat Chinese hybrid warfare in Europe as a frontline China challenge, not a secondary theater. U.S. diplomacy should frame Chinese and Russian hybrid activities as a linked problem, and our embassies and missions to NATO and the EU should raise Chinese cyber activity, economic coercion, and research security whenever they discuss Russia and Ukraine. Second, help Europe reduce their most dangerous dependencies and harden the digital front door against Chinese hybrid threats. Congress can support European efforts to de-risk from Chinese leverage in ports, telecom, and critical minerals, and encourage joint cyber resilience work with European allies. Third, raise the costs for Chinese coercion and support to Russia. Beijing needs to understand that weaponizing trade against European partners or enabling Russia's war will not be cost-free. Congress can press for regular public reporting on Chinese entities that support Russia's defense industry, for targeted sanctions and export controls, and for visible U.S. backing when European allies face Chinese coercion. At the end of the day, this is about more than troops and tanks. It's about who controls the ports, platforms, pipelines, and public narratives that shape Europe's choices in a crisis. A Europe that is more resilient, more diversified, and more clear-eyed about China will be a powerful force multiplier for U.S. strategy. A Europe that remains dependent, divided, and distracted because of Chinese hybrid warfare will not. On behalf of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, I thank you again for inviting me to testify today.